Hi there, and welcome to, for the last time, the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk audio and video programs as we chat with the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. Before we get started, of course, please make sure you like and subscribe. That's how we kind of pay the bills around here, so it's really important that you do that if you haven't. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's that important. So our interesting person today is Roy Huntington, of course, our unofficial co-host. And Roy, thanks for joining us. Today is a pretty momentous occasion on several accounts. So before we get started talking about that, though, thanks for joining us yet again on episode number 300.
When we did number 1.
And you were the first guest.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Exactly. Well, let's jump right into it. We've got some, I would call it huge news. It's not sad news. It's just life changes. And that is the announcement that you've heard it here first. Guns Magazine and American Handgunner Magazine, the print versions, are going away. Or actually, when you get that latest November issue of Guns in the mail as a subscriber, or if you can still find a newsstand someplace, that's it. It's over. I can't express how much I hate that 70 years of history are being put to bed, so to speak. But the future's looking bright, and we're going to talk about that. But I know some folks are probably in shock as to what I just said. Yes, Guns Magazine, the physical magazine, American Handgunner Magazine, are going away. Actually, they're gone already. So, Roy, the big kind of big picture question here. What does this mean to you? You've worked here decades, and you were the editor of American Handgunner. You were the publisher of both magazines. Hearing me make that announcement, what's that do for you?
It was inevitable. And I accepted it 5 years ago, and I think we both have lived through the last few years. We knew that we kept it going basically just by sheer grit.
That's true. That's
an investment of money that really wasn't there to invest. And so I've really been preparing for this. And I'm a real diehard when life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. And
agreed.
I think we've focused so much on print editions, and people don't realize it's a huge investment in labor and money, and I think we need to talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah.
But we're not going to have that, and I'm going to say distraction right now, but we're not going to have that distraction, which means we've been doing print and digital products, our websites and YouTube channel and direct email blasts and podcasts and all that. We've been doing both, which means that, both weren't getting 100%. True. So, I've seen the compromises as our digital side has grown, because, when I took over Handgunner in 2000, that's all I did.
Right.
I worked on one magazine. I had 2 months to build it. And so it was just like the best quality possible. And
yep.
And Guns Magazine was the same way. That was all. And then, like the website kind of got bigger, and
mm-hmm.
I remember people saying, do we really need a website? So
maybe not today.
Yeah, maybe not today.
Yeah.
And so I sort of tried to start preparing the company about 10 years ago. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of old school guys, who owned the company and ran the company, and it was a little bit difficult to nudge everybody in that direction. But finally, mostly in appreciation for the older print readers, we've kept the magazine alive.
Yeah.
And but you just reach a point, and let's talk about that, about how you just can't do it anymore, and why. Thank you, millennial marketers.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's hard to point at any one factor. It's like anything. There's a lot of factors that lined up, but we've kind of reached the end of the road here, and it was incumbent upon the company, because after all, we're a business. We're not a nonprofit, and there's a lot of people that depend on a weekly paycheck, and it's been hard. This has been an awful process on us personally, all of us that work here, the bosses, the folks that put everything together. And I got to say, Roy, I've worked a lot of places, and including newspapers, and this has been the greatest team I've ever worked with. And it's not completely going away, but some of those folks are, and that's probably the worst part. It's the potential to really do stuff was there, but at the end of the day, you got to make a profit or you don't have any product whatsoever. We're not government. So talk about the team a little bit.
You bet. Well, first of all, people think, they look at our competitors, Guns and Ammo magazine, for instance, well, it's owned by a billionaire. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I've talked to the people there. He doesn't care if it makes money or not.
Yeah.
Which is a nice, thing to have if you're the staff.
Yeah.
We're a very teeny tiny family owned business, literally. I mean, I don't know. What do we have right now? 10 employees, maybe?
Yeah.
At our heyday, we used to have 40, 45, 48 employees. And, but of course, as the market changes through the years, all that has to change. But I agree with you completely. I mean, you and I worked with hundreds of different people on the police department, squad after squad, different people, different leaders, different everything. I've worked in other segments of our industry. And this was absolutely, I enjoyed coming to work every day. I still do, and I know you do too. Because I remember when I invited you to join the team, you made it clear right from the beginning. It's like, you know what, this is really fun, and I'm enjoying working with you people. And we're not whiners, we're not moaners. We always try to see the way to get something done. What's the positive thing? And I will say this is that Tom Von Rosen, who hired me, was my original boss. He was the son of George Von Rosen, who founded the company in the 30s. And Tom, from my first day as a freelance writer for the company, we would have a meeting, and the first thing, if an idea came up, Tom would say, well, how does this affect our readers? How is this good for the readers?
Yeah.
And that was always the number one thing on the plate. And I have to say that never changed. It really hasn't. I think that's one thing that pains me so much, is that I know what's good for most of our readers is to get a print magazine.
Yeah.
And it makes me crazy that we can't do that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we've been talking about is doing away with a print magazine. It hurts your legitimacy, because there's a billion websites out there, but there are very few gun magazines. And there's only one original newsstand gun magazine, which is us. January issue 1955, we were the first ones on a newsstand. Yeah, you could buy some of the NRA pubs if you remember the NRA and things like that. But to actually go to the corner drugstore and buy a shooting magazine on the newsstand, we were it. And Guns and Ammo actually came after us. But it is almost heartbreaking to see the magazines go. But a point you made there that I wanted to address, and I'm pretty proud of, is normally when these things happen, and in the publishing industry in general, what happens is it just goes away. You never hear anymore. It's people go, what happened? And I will say that when we started having these meetings, there's 4 editors here of the brands. There's Jade Mulday, editor of Shooting Industry, which is our business-to-business publication. Eric Gelhaus, the editor of AmericanCop.com. And, of course, Tom McHale, the editor of American Handgunner, and myself. And we all said, we owe the readers an explanation. And from a business perspective, it's better if everything just kind of goes away. But we were united in the fact that we do look at our readers as certainly as friends, and in some cases quasi family, and we owe it to folks. And that was my final thing. I said, after 70 years, we need to tell people what's going on. And they're adults; they can figure it out, they can understand. And there's going to be some, heartache and discontent. That's just normal with any change. But I was really proud of my coworkers that we really stood firm and said, we got to tell folks what this was about. So,
well, I agree with you. I think part of it is because our customers, our clients, our readers, maybe often don't understand the mechanics of magazine work, because to them, they say, well, I sent my subscription in, so why can't I get a magazine?
Yeah.
And just let's talk just for a couple of minutes about that, is that in the magazine industry, subscriptions pay for about 40% of the magazine.
Right.
And so the balance has to be taken up by investments that the company have that make profits on, but most of that is all at paid advertising. And so that's what encompasses that 100% of income necessary to successfully send out the magazine. Well, over the last 10 years and over the last 5 years, the cost of paper has gone up 3 to 4 times what it was, and which we have never passed that on to readers. So postage has gone up about almost 5 times. It used to be there were independent magazine distributors, which means that you would send your magazines to these people and they would physically deliver them to, the local neighborhood grocery store and go in and put them up on the rack.
Yeah.
And over the years, all of those have been consolidated. And so essentially in today's world, there's one distributor. And so you're at their mercy. And whatever they decide to charge, that's what they charge.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't know too. If you send 10 magazines to a store and they sell 5, well, yeah, you get, maybe $1 out of that, maybe, if you look at all the other expenses involved. But you eat the cost of the 5 that didn't sell.
Yep.
So all that postage, all that transportation, all the paper costs, all the paying the writers, all of that stuff, you lose that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's one thing that really blew my mind when I first really got into the writing business. And magazines and books are one of the only industries that do this. Imagine if your local Chevrolet dealership at the end of the model year had 15 cars left over. They're not going to put them in the shredder, but that's essentially what happens in the magazine and book business. So that's the way it's always been, and people have tried to change that. But yeah, if something doesn't sell, you are not only out the cost of building it and sending it to them, you're out the cost of those ones that didn't sell. So
it really is. And so what has happened now is that over the years we've increasingly lost the print advertising. Yeah. And it's not because we don't try hard. Subscription rates are the same. In other words, the cost of the magazine really hasn't changed in years, and our number of subscribers is strong. It's where we want it. Unfortunately, that only pays for 40% of the production costs. So over the years, as I think everyone who's listening to this realizes, as the move toward digital has occurred, there are younger people who are coming into the industry, and they're assuming positions of power and authority, especially in the marketing side of things. And they personally don't read anything print. And so they think nobody else does. And Brent will attest to the fact. I can't tell you how many times I've sat across from a millennial marketer at the SHOT Show and showing them the magazines, and it's hard to get them to even look up from their phone.
Yeah.
And
you kind of get that, oh, that's nice, Papaw.
Right. Yeah, that's it. And I say, well, except I want you to realize that probably, I don't know what it is now, 70% of the people who buy things in our industry are older people who like to read print magazines.
Yeah.
And they have the money, their houses are paid for, their cars are paid for, their kids have moved out, their college is paid for. They have the disposable income and they want to spend it because they couldn't before.
Yeah.
And you're not going to catch them, with a quickie digital blast
Yeah. And, this is the only place I've ever worked of magazines, certainly newspapers, but we get emails, I would say almost weekly, of folks saying, hey, I really like that story on, the Master Blaster 5000. I went out and bought 3 of them.
Oh, yeah.
And we get that all the time, and we pass it along to our marketing folks. But you might as well be, talking to the wall when you're talking to some of these marketers. And I got in trouble one time with a salesperson my first year here at the SHOT Show. I was getting that basically cold shoulder. And I'm like, okay, look, Mr. Marketer, Mrs. Marketer, you know who my audience is? Well, yeah, it's older. And I said, yeah. And they've got money to spend. And where your influencer may sell a few holsters, I can move, guns by doing this. And they just look at you like, okay, that's nice. But
I know.
On the flip side of it, it's been very gratifying. The folks at Ruger, Springfield Armory, et cetera, many of our longtime customers, they know that if they want to move guns or accessories, they put it in print, and especially in Guns and American Handgunner. And that to me is one of the big downsides to our partners, our friends, and our clients, is they're not going to have that outlet anymore. And it's a shame, because if more of these marketing directors understood what they were getting, the value they were getting, they don't understand it. They don't subscribe to magazines. They don't read magazines, and they don't understand it.
No.
So
and I have to say that I personally know for a fact, and so do you, that our readers are motivated, and they believe what they read in the magazine because we tell the truth. We vet advertisers, so that's why you don't see, weirdo cigarette ads or you know what I mean? I
just turned one down the other day because they had advertised previously, and the product turned out to be, I wouldn't call it garbage, but whatever's one step above garbage. And hey, they're wanting to come back, and I'm like, not doing it. I'm not going to put my byline on the line. If they want to buy advertising, and that's all fine, but I'm not going to put my name attached to anything recommending it. And we're all that way here. That's one of the cool things.
Well, but we shoot ourselves in the foot, because we could go out tomorrow and get all these one-page ads for chewing tobacco and stuff. Our readers would hate that, and you've made that clear. But they do buy. I talked to Les Bear and Nighthawk Custom and all these people, and that's why they advertise this. They say, when I put an ad in your magazine, people call my business and want more information and buy guns from me.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, there's just not enough of that. So
yeah.
I will say, if people were willing to spend, $50 a year, we could probably send out a magazine,
Yeah.
If you wanted to pay a little more than that, we could send out a quarterly that's perfect bound. I would love to see that, but people, unfortunately, even the older guys, and girls, they don't want to spend that money on what they perceive as just a magazine. Well, it used to be $5.
Yeah.
Well, your car used to be $3,000, and now it's $50,000.
Yeah.
So that's the reason, is that we just can't physically support a print magazine anymore.
Yeah.
So now go ahead.
I wanted to interrupt. One thing we didn't cover, and it's just another facet, is newsstand. Newsstand used to be really important to us. Can you even find a newsstand anymore? I can't in my town. There isn't one, other than at the grocery rack at the, UFOs abducted President Trump, and then the, 17 recipes for pumpkin spice cookies. Other than that, you're not going to find magazines around any place, and gun magazines. There were a lot of places that took us off the shelf as part of their rush to embrace whatever you want to say, but we were a casualty of that culture war. So long story short is, we used to depend on newsstand for a lot of our revenue, and it's essentially evaporated. So
I agree,
just wanted
with
to get
you.
that point.
And we used to always have high newsstand sell-through rates. Anything above 20% is significant on the newsstand, which, if you think about it, is weird, because that means if you put 10 magazines in a newsstand, you sell 2 or 3, you're doing really, really well. Handgunner used to have almost 50% sell-through rate, and
Wow.
Guns Magazine used to always be 35%, 40%.
Both of those are incredible.
Yeah, but you're right in the sense though that it's difficult to find a newsstand. Even the other interesting thing that happened, and I think it's one of the reasons why Handgunner was successful, is that magazines have become very vertical, and it's, as you know, it's difficult to be a general magazine. Guns magazine. That means you have to do shotguns and rifles and pistols and hand loading and hunting and everything, right? Which means that the person who picks up your magazine, he may be a hunter, so he's just really looking for hunting articles, and the next guy might be a handgun shooter, so now he's only getting that many. With Handgunner, well, if they buy it, it's because they like handguns, right? So they like everything. And if I've noticed on the newsstand, because we have a Books A Million here, and it has a huge magazine rack with hundreds of titles. But whereas it used to be, bicyclist, well, now there's 10 titles.
Yeah.
Mountain biking on electric bike quarterly.
Exactly.
Road bike lightweight carbon fiber monthly.
Yeah. I mean, even in the hunting, that's even too broad now. People just want to know about long distance pronghorn hunting in Wyoming.
That's it.
And that's all they talk about. They go online, they find all the forums, and and then the algorithms. We didn't even talk about that. That's another whole thing that's destroying our society in general. Is you only see what the computer thinks you want to see, and it reinforces that perception it retrains your brain to, I only want to see what I want to see. I don't want to find anything else that's not part of my thing.
It's distracting. No, you're exactly right. I've also seen magazine circulation shrink dramatically. There was a time when one of our competitor gun magazines was 775,000 circulation, and now they're in the high 200,000s. And I recall other magazines like that where do you remember Popular Science and Popular Mechanics? They were like 1 million, circulation, and now they're like 50,000 and barely alive. National Geographic, I noticed, you went from 10 million, and these big, thick, perfect bound, beautiful magazines, and now they're just embarrassing to see. So that's the reason, okay? We cannot afford to do it anymore unless you guys are willing to spend $50 a year on a subscription. So if you want to, let me know. Maybe we could do that. But I think it's important. Now let's talk about, though, what's the new picture going to be? Because I know I've already had people say, well, I only read 2 gun magazines, and now I'm not going to be able to read those magazines. I don't know what I'm going to do, right? Yeah. Well, what you're going to do is get your iPad out, and you're going to have to learn that if you go to AmericanHandgunner.com and GunsMagazine.com, if you go to the YouTube channel and type in FMG Publications, you will find us. It's as simple as that. And there's still going to be articles. And sign up for our direct email blast, because if you don't already get them, you should be getting them, because they're vetted, they're high quality. It's not just trash. It's not internet digital noise. It's core information that people like our readers want to know about, which is why they sign up for them. And so, you may find something else interesting. Which is when you read a magazine and you put it down, well, yes, it's still there, and you can pick it up and read it again, right? Which is a valuable thing, I think. But the hard thing to do is, for instance, I have a complete collection of American Handgunner from the first issue to today. But the problem is, I go, well, I remember reading about that new SIG, but man, I sure can't remember which issue it is, right? Well, when you get introduced to the websites, you can do a search, SIG 226, search, ta-da! Here's all the articles about the SIG 226. And so if you don't let it scare you off. Look at it as a new tool and a new way to get what you want, which is the information about guns. And we'll still have the same faces. I mean, maybe to your chagrin, you'll be seeing my face and Brent's face and, all the writers that and stuff. So it's all going to be there. It's just we've had to cut our losses in order to stay in business and focus on the products.
Exactly.
Actually, can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
That interestingly enough, the vast majority of companies who are print advertising have transferred their accounts to our digital side.
Yes.
And the digital products. And I think that shows confidence, because these are senior companies in the industry, and they don't just spend money because they like you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was what was very gratifying. I know our sales team was worried about, are folks going to transfer their print budgets over to digital? And overwhelmingly, it's been positive. So I think that's reflective of our audience, our writers, editors, and the whole team that has built this thing. I hate to say it. I've said it a lot. We're the best kept secret in the gun business. But for the folks that know, they really value what we've got. And one other thing I'm going to add is, as long as I'm associated with the magazine, we are not going to embrace the lowest common denominator, what's frequently called digital writing. I know guys, senior gun writers who are working for digital publications. Yeah, I got to do 40 articles a month. Well, those aren't gun reviews. Those are, as Jim Shepard, our friend, said, it's digital potato chips. For the time being, anyway, we're not going to embrace digital potato chips. We're going to keep bringing you the same stuff. We're just bringing it a different method. So as long as I'm here and Tom's at Handgunner, we're going to resist the urge to play that game, because I think it just devalues everything even further. So we'll keep bringing you the same great stuff. You'll just have to see it on a screen somewhere instead of the pages of your favorite gun magazine in the outhouse at the hunting camp. So.
Well, if you think about it, though, if you have an iPad, and if you don't have one, you should go buy one. You can get a cheap one for $300. So you just leave one of the pages open on AmericanHandgunner.com and leave one of the pages open on GunsMagazine.com. And now, actually, you'll be getting new gun content almost every day.
Yeah.
And you can look through it, and the pictures are bright, and if you see the podcast, you click on it, you can listen to the podcast. So there's a lot of positive things to it. And I know as the years have gone by, a lot of these millennial marketers have told me this, that, well, yeah, but these old guys, they're not really digital. And it's like, you know what? I beg to differ with you.
Exactly.
I mean, everybody I know who's 70 years old has an iPhone, an iPad, has a desktop computer at home. I mean, we both know that, I don't know, 99.99% of the reader mail we get is email.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, no, and that's what I could never understand, why these people didn't realize the fact that the older people are very digitally savvy.
Yeah.
But they also read magazines and buy stuff they see in the magazines.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They should be taking advantage of both of that,
Yeah.
So.
Well, that discussion went longer than I thought, but there's so much there. We could probably talk for a long, long time, but let's close this thing out. Roy, what do you think? Can the soul of a magazine, of a brand, my brand, and that's the way I've always referred to it. I don't own Guns Magazine, but I own Guns Magazine. At least I have for the last 7 and some years. Can that soul survive this transition to digital, do you think?
Absolutely, because digital is only digital, and if there are no people involved, that it's soulless. It's potato chips, like you said. But the same passion and the same faces and the same knowledge and the same attention to detail that you saw in a print article is going to be exactly the same if you read it on the website. In other words, those same people who feel that the readers are important are still there, and they're still doing it. It's just the medium is different now. Yeah. I mean, I know, there are websites that I go to, a lot of makers' websites, machinist websites, and things like that. And a lot of times I'll see one, and you go to read it, and you realize this is just nothing. It's blah, 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 blah.
And then that seems to be getting worse.
Oh, yeah, it is. Thank you, AI. But then there'll be another real simple website or simple YouTube channel, and you can tell that it's done with honesty. and whoever's doing it has the experience and has the respect for his readers or viewers, and it shows. And I like to read those or watch them. And I think that's what people need to understand, that just because they have bad experience with digital, that doesn't mean that they're going to have that with us, because I promise you they won't. You know they won't. We know. Yep. I mean, we wouldn't be a part of it if they had said, okay, we're going to take it digital now, and all the articles are going to be AI, and we don't
stuffed
really
with
care.
Keywords and sell.
With keyword, sell, and all our YouTube videos are going to have everyone's face going like that, right? We both would have like turned the switch off.
Yeah.
Said, I don't think so. Not today. Thank you very much. But no, the general consensus has been, let's carry the flag on. We're just kind of using this additional medium now.
Yep. So. And that's what it is. When you think about the actual term media and medium, it's just a way to get something. And going forward, you're not going to get the paper. You're going to get the electrons coming in your house. So hopefully we will keep the soul of Guns Magazine, American Handgunner alive. So,
well,
go ahead.
I say, when there used to be a magazine in San Diego called The Reader, and it was a free magazine. It was, I think, a weekly, and it was printed on really crappy newspaper because it was free, right? But you know what? Everybody always read it. Because it was always full of really interesting things, and it was good articles, and it was vetted well, and the editor cared, and all that. And then as time went by, it changed, and it became more glossy and more fancy and stuff like that. And it became more commercialized, and then pretty soon nobody cared anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So...
I'm sorry, I zoned out. Were you talking about Cracker Barrel?
Oh, right. There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so... just because you're losing the print magazine doesn't mean you're losing the quality and the information and the people and the passion that are in it now. You're not. You're just going to get us sort of more live than ever before.
Yeah. Well, that's a great place to end that discussion. Other than I want to say, I'm sure there's a lot of questions regarding this. And frankly, we don't have a lot of answers. We've never done this, so we're going to wing it. But I can assure you we're going to do the best we can and bring you the great quality content as long as we're associated with it. And we would really appreciate your support, not just for the podcast, of course, our YouTube channel, but make sure you visit the websites and let us know how the good and the bad of what you see. So now, our second big announcement, and this is the one that is near and dear to me. The Guns Magazine podcast, hopefully that'll be the last time I say that, is now Guns Podcast US. But I will tell you right now, as much as I love the magazine and I love writing, the podcast has been a passion project for me. This is episode 300, which is pretty remarkable for a weekly podcast. And actually, I got to tell you, Roy, I compiled an entire list of podcast episodes, and I'm not exactly sure. I didn't count. I think we're actually over 300, because I know there was one case where we messed up the numbering, and then there's been some specials. So I actually think we're over 300, but it's pretty remarkable and a milestone that we got here. But given all these uncertainties that we're seeing, I realized a couple of years ago, I need to be preparing for whatever may come. And for the time being, I am staying associated with Guns Magazine, but we decided to go ahead. Episode number 300 was the perfect time to make this switch. So Guns Podcast US. It's the same podcast. We're just we're giving it a refresh a little bit. The logo's changed. We're going to try and streamline things somewhat, but it's still going to be the same podcast. And my hope is for the future, we're going to do a lot more. So before I get into that, though, Roy, any thoughts as the original guest and guest number 300 of the Guns Podcast US?
You've done a great job, and I remember when you started it was really important to you that we are valid and current, and we don't BS anything. Yep. And so I tend to look at all of the comments on the podcast and all of our YouTube videos. And so I read them. I answer the vast majority of them. And the single thing that I hear most often about the podcast is, even if they don't agree with us, they always say, you know what, it's really nice to hear people who are sort of sane and fair and honest
Sort of.
and speak from experience and admit it when they don't know something and make fun of themselves when they mess up, you know, and talk about that. And I think that's important to us. That's how, and I'm looking forward to a lot more. So with this new change, I think it's interesting because we have a little more independence, because now it's really what Brent wants to do. Which is a little
scary.
frightening, yeah, if you think about it. But
Exactly.
I'm really looking forward to it. And also, you know, Brent will still be, you'll still have the podcasts on the YouTube channel if that's where you find them now. But that's all the more reason to sign up for the direct email blast, because that way you're notified when things go live. I'll still be doing most of the videos on the YouTube channel. And it'll be kind of just like it has been, you know. I mean, I'll be expanding it, doing other things, doing some longer videos, more how-to videos. People seem to be really interested in that. But I think you're going to be seeing this sort of partnership more and more between Brent and I.
Yes.
And we will continue to support the magazines.
Yep. Well, and that kind of leads right into where I want to take this thing. Looking at what has worked, and there's been some things that sure didn't work. What's interesting is when you think a show, you do it, and you think, man, that was good stuff. I'm really proud of that. It's gonna be 2 million downloads, and then it does nothing, crickets. And then one that none of them are a throwaway, but some of them you really don't prepare for. You just kind of talk, and it's like, it was okay, but you know, I don't think it's going to change the world. And suddenly it's exploded. And it's funny. Anybody that tells you they've got it figured out and they know how to make stuff popular or viral, as they say, they're full of you know what, because there is no rhyme or reason. So what we do is just keep doing what we do. And one trend that's very clear is folks really like Roy and I conversing. And it's fun for me. It's fun for me. I think it's fun for Roy. And so you have to make a content plan on this kind of stuff. And so basically, the Guns Podcast US will come out every Friday, as it has been, with a few exceptions. Occasionally, I get sick or, you know, the sky falls in. But for the most part, every week you'll get Roy and I talking about what we talk about. And then my eventual goal, we got to, as I often say, crawl, walk, run. We want to do a additional episode, and that's going to be more freeform and not even strictly guns. So I was looking at the audience, and they really like the gun stuff. Our non-gun stuff doesn't usually perform as well. Sometimes it performs better, but for the most part, it's a little less, but we still enjoy doing it, and folks, and they still do fairly well. So my thought is we'll start doing a midweek component, and I don't even have a name for it, but as soon as we get this new brand established and kind of get things on a smooth track, then we're going to start looking into that. And that's probably the place I'm going to bring in some of the other guests, because we have been blessed, and I'll say I've been blessed by my association with Guns Magazine and FMG Publications. I've gotten to talk with all the top folks in the industry. And by that, I don't mean the latest YouTube star, because there's folks that are far bigger than I've talked to. But when you talk about people that really have made a difference to the shooting industry, to the shooting business, or have been involved in some real things that, you know, you can't even imagine. I've been blessed to talk to all these folks. I've talked to the CEOs of Ruger and Savage, and you know, I've talked to Vince Bancroft, who was in the middle of the North Hollywood shootout. I've talked to you know, Jerry Mishlik and Lena. The list goes on, and I've been blessed. So those kind of things, the interviews with personalities, maybe a discussion of Roy's workshop and his current cabinetry. That'll probably go midweek, and so keep an eye out for that. I hope to do that very soon, but we got to get Guns Podcast US rolling and get everybody accustomed to that. So, Roy, my personal thanks. You have been a major reason this podcast has been successful. And when I say one of the world's biggest gun talk programs, that's true. If you look at our numbers, podcast numbers are always very closely held because for a lot of different reasons, but from the numbers I can find, we're one of the leaders, and that's a credit to you folks, our audience. You obviously like what we're doing, and you like our approach, and I appreciate all the support you get and all those comments. And like Roy says, he reads every comment. I try to, but with everything else I had, like that little old print magazine that I don't have to deal with now, I hope to be more active. So the other thing I need to talk about is Guns Podcast US. That's a website now, and I built it with my own two little hands, and I think it's pretty good. It's got, of course, that's where you can find all the podcasts, and I did something you don't normally find with podcasts. I made a list of every single solitary episode and where you can click to listen to the audio version. So if you remember, like Roy said, man, way back when they talked to, Al Casper, the former CEO of Savage, it'll be there. And the problem is with the podcast directories, you can only go back a certain distance. So every single episode is on the website, Guns Podcast US. We've got a blog page. We'll be just talking about when I feel like I want to say something. We can do that. There is also information about some of our partners and sponsors, latest gear news, stuff that I don't just throw all the gear news up there. I throw it up of folks that we know and we trust and we believe in their gear. And so you can find that there. I'm allowing comments. That may be a bad move on my part, but for now, I want folks to create a kind of an interactive world. So make sure you check that out. But gunspodcast.us, and you may say, well, why not .com? Because, well, it's not available, and they won't sell it for a reasonable price, so we had to go with Guns Podcast US. And frankly, we have a lot of international listeners and viewers, but really we're based in the United States, and we're talking about the U.S. firearms industry, so that just seemed like a natural, and I really like supporting that .us. So gunspodcast.us. So did I miss anything there, Roy?
I don't think so. I mean, a lot of this, I don't want to say we're shooting from the hip, but I mean, because we have a lot of experience with all this other stuff too, but I think that just to have an open mind through this transition, if you have any questions about any of this, please post them in the comments, and I'll get back to you, or Brent will.
Yep.
So cool. I'm looking forward to it, actually. I mean, it was inevitable. It's almost like it's a weight off our back.
Yeah.
I mean, we were expecting this other shoe to drop at some point.
Yeah.
It's been being maintained more by a miracle than anything. So yeah.
Don't you know it, brother?
Yeah. So I think it's going to be good, and I think there's going to be a lot of positive things, and I think everyone just needs to have an open mind. So I have some online sites that I go to that used to be print magazines, and I found that actually it can be really convenient because, especially that search engine, it's like,
yeah.
Gee, now my interest is this. So now you search for that, and there it all is.
Yeah. And I was reading recently that search engines are intentionally degrading their results. And I'm like, well, why would they do that? Well, it's because they want you to, and I noticed myself doing this. Page 1 didn't have what I wanted. Let's go to page 2, page 3, page 4. Well, every time you do that, they're serving you more ads and gathering more data. And the nice thing is now, if you know a website that you like Guns Magazine or gunspodcast.us, you can go there and you don't have to put up with that bunch of Mickey Mouse, where there's a word for it I won't use, but as these big companies get to a certain stage, they really don't care about you. They just care about sucking all the dollars out of it they can, and that's where a couple of these big companies have gotten. But we have not, Roy. We still...
I think...
You get what you see.
Well, that's an important point. In other words, when you go to AmericanHandgunner.com or GunsMagazine.com and you search, you're not going to be blasted with, pop-up ads of girls in, bikinis or whatever. Yeah. Maybe that's bad. I don't know. But Yeah, so I just keep an open mind and just go do it. And this could be a good excuse to tell your wife or girlfriend or husband that, you know what, I need an iPad for Christmas.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Well, I just looked down at the timer. Oh my goodness, this episode has certainly gone long, but
Yeah.
we've been living this for a while. And again, I think the overarching thing here is, unlike a lot of brands, we try to explain what's going on because I think people want to understand. I like to know what my favorite musical artist is doing and what guitar they play. And Roy, I know you like to know what chisel they're using when they're doing a mortise and tenon. I feel like that makes everybody, pulling back the curtain, helps folks really get invested in what we're doing and feel like they're part of something. And when you read Guns Magazine at gunsmagazine.com, or you listen to the podcast on a podcast directory, or you go to gunspodcast.us, you are part of a community, a small but mighty community. So I'm hoping this is the start of a brand new day where a lot of great stuff is going to happen. So, Roy, we've gone really long for a podcast episode, for us anyway. Any closing thoughts before we wrap this thing up in a nice, neat bow?
Well, this was big news. And so I think it deserved the attention. And I agree with you. I think the readers deserve to know what was going on and some of the mechanics behind it. And so I'm glad we were able to do it. I'm looking forward to the future. It'll be the same quality, the same people, the same ideas, the same fun. So stay with us.
Stay with us. Great words. Well, thanks, Roy Huntington. Again, many, many thanks for everything you've done for me and for the podcast over the years. And I thank you for listening to this entire episode of the gunspodcast.us. Make sure you check out gunsmagazine.com for great gun writing, and also check out gunspodcast.us for all the fun stuff and random brain dribble from your host, Brent Wheat, who is currently the editor of Guns Magazine. And I'm planning on being that for a while, but we'll see what the future brings. But hopefully folks are going to rally around us and support what we're doing, both the podcast and gunsmagazine.com. So I really appreciate it. Please make sure you do that like and subscribe thing. That's really important, and that's how we keep going. And we explain to those millennial marketers that, hey, they've got a pretty significant audience here who really likes and believes what they're doing, and they buy stuff. So I appreciate it. So on behalf of Roy Huntington and all my current and former family and friends here at FMG Publications, I am Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you yet again, and for the future, now get out there and get shooting.